The first thing I heard when I stepped into the garage wasn't the sound of tools or the scent of turpentine and old wood. It was my father's voice, low, deliberate, slicing through the dusty air like a utility knife. "She's too comfortable. If we don't act now, we'll be stuck cleaning up her mess in 5 years. And then my mother, cool, unhurried, a tone so measured it made my blood chill. Nathan already revised the trust. She's off the primary succession list. All we need is her signature on that remodel form. Once she's done, we're finished." For a moment, I stood perfectly still, cocking gun in one hand, breath locked in my throat like someone had shut off my oxygen. The dust in the garage seemed to rise around me, thick, choking, like the past had finally decided to become physical. And it was heavy. I didn't move. I didn't cry. I didn't make a sound. I listened. Because that's what you do when you realize you've walked into a room where the narrative of your life, your place in it, has already been written by someone else. And you weren't even asked to read the first draft. My name is Claire Morgan. I'm 36 years old. I run a boutique design and renovation firm that's booked solid through the next quarter. People call me when they want a broken thing made beautiful again. I specialize in things others throw away. I never thought that skill would apply to my own name. When my mother called 3 weeks ago asking if I could help out with the guest wing, I hesitated. It wasn't the work. I can build a vaulted ceiling with my eyes closed. It was her tone, that sugar-powdered performance of closeness. She said, "It would mean a lot to your father." He didn't even like my exposed beam style, said it looked unfinished. Still, I said yes, because somewhere, deep under all the pragmatic layers I've built, there's a sliver of me that still wanted in, still wanted to believe that family, mine, in all its cold marble perfection, had a place for someone like me. 3 days ago, I loaded up my truck. I brought tools, sketches, linen swatches, and an absurd hope wrapped in my worn leather portfolio. And now, standing in the garage, invisible in the shadows, I heard exactly what that hope was worth. "She thinks we're finally valuing her work," my father said, a faint chuckle undercutting his words. "It's convenient." "We'll make it legal once she's done," my mother added. "Let's not spook her." Convenient. Spook her. They weren't just manipulating me. They were hunting me, using kindness like bait. And I, God help me, had walked right into the trap, smiling. I backed away from the door like a ghost, my boots silent against the concrete. I didn't confront them. I didn't throw the caulking gun, through the wall or scream or demand answers. I picked up the tool I came for, walked back into the house. The hallway smelled like lemon oil and denial. My mother looked up from her laptop in the kitchen. "Find everything okay?" I nodded. "Perfect," I said, and smiled. A perfect smile, one I'd practiced in high school every time a teacher asked if everything was okay at home. She returned the smile. "We're so lucky to have your expertise, Claire." That was the moment. The first nail in the frame I would build not for them, but around them. Later that evening, in the guest room they hadn't touched since I was 17, I pulled out the architectural drafts and spread them on the floor. Not to work, to think, to see. They'd taught me to see blueprints, but never to question what had already been drafted. Now I questioned everything, including a form I had found innocently, tucked into the project folder earlier that day, one labeled Remodel Release Waiver. It looked like a formality, just standard liability protection, until I read the fine print again. Section C, subclause the 3. Labor and material costs contributed by family members will be considered as gift contributions, non-compensable unless otherwise stated. My name was handwritten in the field next to contributor. And the otherwise stated? Blank. That wasn't a waiver. That was the setup. a document that would nullify any future claim I could make for compensation, whether legal or moral. I had almost signed it that morning thinking it was about site safety. My mother had slid it across the table with a casual, "Just so we don't get sued if you stub your toe." That wasn't a joke. That was her alibi. I placed the waiver back, in the folder. Neatly. Precisely. They thought I was emotional, that I'd fly off the handle, say something rash, give them the upper hand. But I wasn't emotional. I was surgical. The next morning, I drove into town. I told them I had a supplier meeting. I did not mention that I was meeting Sam Jennings, contractor, code enforcement expert, and a former client-turned-friend. I showed him the waiver. His brow arched. This isn't a waiver. This is an erasure. He was right. It wasn't just paperwork. It was premeditated disinheritance. Not a removal. An erasure. The kind you draft when you expect resistance and plan to outmaneuver it in writing. Sam leaned back. You ever file a mechanic's lien before? I blinked. Against my own parents? Against a client who thinks you're free labor. Yes. His voice didn't waver. That was what made him dangerous in court. He didn't posture. He prepared. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He started explaining the process, and I listened. Every detail, every clause, every deadline, because now I had one too. That night, back at the house, dinner was salmon and silence. My parents talked about Nathan, his new job at a boutique firm in San Francisco, his new condo, his future. I chewed, nodded, even asked about the tile options for the bathroom, like nothing had changed, but something had. Something irreversible. After dinner, my father handed me a check. "For materials," he said. "We appreciate your work." It was written out for $3,000, not even a third of what I'd already spent. I thanked him and slid it into my folder. I didn't deposit it. I photocopied it, marked the date, added it to a file labeled evidence, because that wasn't a payment. That was bait, and I wasn't hungry anymore. Just before bed, my mother knocked softly on the door. "Need anything, honey?" I looked up. "Just rest." She smiled, the same smile she used on neighbors and charity boards. "You've been such a help, really. I hope you know how proud we are." There it was, the compliment, the hook. And I nodded, because she didn't need to know she'd already lost me. But then something strange happened. As she turned to leave, she paused. "Oh, and Claire?" "Yes?" "If you get any mail from our estate attorney, just forward it to Nathan. We're updating some things, nothing urgent." Nothing urgent. They were counting on me to do what I always did. Cooperate. Comply. Be grateful for scraps. I closed the door after she left and stared at the space she'd occupied, at the air where the dagger had been hidden in kindness. They'd trained me to be loyal. They hadn't trained me to be lethal. Not yet. But they would learn. You're probably watching this on your TV right now, just letting it roll while you relax. But if my story has you feeling something, don't just sit there. Pick up your phone, search LP, Family Drama on YouTube, and hit subscribe. Because sometimes, the quietest way to say I understand is simply wanting to hear more stories, like mine. Stories that don't always get told but always deserve to be heard. I found Nathan's text buried under a dozen promotional emails. It was timestamped a full week before Mom's phone call. "Hey, heard you're back in town. Let's talk soon." 7 words, polite, meaningless. But now, they read like a trigger. Not concern, not connection. A warning. Sent before I had even packed my bag. He knew I'd be coming. I never responded. Not because I forgot. I saw the message the same evening I loaded my van with tools and fabric rolls. I remember staring at the screen, thumb hovering over a draft reply. You're the first one in this family to ask if I'm alive in 6 months. Should I be flattered or suspicious? I deleted it. Nathan didn't do casual check-ins. If he texted, it was because he needed something or someone told him to. That message wasn't a greeting. It was a move. That morning, I laid out floor. Plans on the long oak table in the sunroom, aligning my measuring tape to the exact angle of the bay windows. My mother sipped her second cup of chamomile tea, pretending to admire the antique-style doorknobs I'd sourced. Her eyes weren't following the brass. They were following me. You've really found your niche, she said softly. It should have felt like praise. It felt like surveillance. She kept watching me, waiting for something. Maybe for gratitude. Maybe for submission. Thank you, I said, without looking up. She smiled like a politician just before an attack ad. When she left the room, I followed. 10 minutes later, quietly, into Dad's study. I told myself I needed to double-check the order form for the paint. But what I really wanted was proof. I didn't know of what yet, but something told me there was always a paper trail in this house. His desk drawer was slightly ajar. Inside, several legal pads, neatly stacked, notes in sharp, impatient handwriting. One page was titled Trust Amendment Version 4. My name wasn't anywhere on the asset distribution, but scribbled in red in the margin was a note. Confirm revocation clause. Nathan has draft. I felt my stomach harden, not drop. Not fear. Something worse. Something cleaner. Nathan wasn't a spectator. He was the architect. I flipped to the next page. It detailed a suggested evaluation of the 2014 disbursement, the money they gave me to start my business. $20,000. No contract. No discussion of repayment. A supposed show of faith. A rare moment of parental generosity. Until now. One bullet point read, no signed terms. Verbal leverage possible. Frame as investment, not gift. Verbal leverage, the most expensive phrase I've ever read in ink. That night, I sat in my old childhood bedroom, surrounded by faux naive relics of who I used to be. Framed photos of middle school plays, a ribbon from a high school art show, and I pulled up my email, searched 2014, every thread with my parents, every digital trace of that so-called loan. I found the wire transfer notification. I found my mother's email confirming the funds. Subject line, use this wisely. Sweetheart, we believe in you. There it was. The dagger dressed in silk. I also found something else, a forwarded email chain from Nathan to both parents. Dated last month. Attached, a PDF titled, Family Asset Risk Exposure. Claire. The language was cold. Corporate. Strategic. It outlined potential vulnerabilities in estate structure if current asset access continues unmonitored. There was a line near the bottom that made my throat go dry. Use project involvement as time-sensitive closure opportunity. Secure her signature on liability waivers before room completion. After that, default to contingency plan B. They weren't reacting to anything. They were executing something. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the mattress, staring at the old ceiling fan turning overhead like the slow tick of a countdown. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was still. Like the moment before the roof caves in, when everything is holding together by illusion. In the morning, I cooked breakfast for everyone. Eggs, toast, coffee. I laughed at Dad's bad pun about the tile samples looking like something from a prison cafeteria. Mom complimented my blouse, said the color was elegantly restrained. Nathan arrived 30 minutes later, claiming to be in town for a client deposition. We all sat at the table like nothing had already been detonated. And then, the performance. I've been meaning to chat with you, Claire, he said, pouring syrup over pancakes he didn't eat. I had an idea about your business. expansion opportunities. I know people looking for design expertise on larger projects. My mother smiled approvingly. Isn't that wonderful? Your brother's always thinking ahead? I smiled. Yes, he is. The moment he leaned forward and said, but to do that, you'll need to streamline liabilities, especially old obligations. So I thought we could take a look at that loan agreement together, just to clean up the language. I knew. This wasn't a conversation. It was a sting. They wanted my cooperation to legitimize their retroactive rewrite of the past. My signature would turn a decade-old gift into a formal debt, a weapon they could point at me whenever they chose. And if I refused, they'd paint me as unstable, ungrateful, and unprofessional, a liability to their social image. I picked up my fork, took a bite, chewed slowly, swallowed. That's thoughtful, I said. Send it over. He blinked. Just once. You'll look at it? Of course, I said. If it helps the family. My mother placed a gentle hand on my wrist. That's our girl. It was the kind of touch she reserved for photo ops and funerals. Later that day, I received the document via encrypted email. An official-looking agreement, backdated and worded with enough vagueness to imply consent. At the bottom, my name typed in waiting, but I didn't print it. I forwarded it to a private inbox, then deleted the thread. I called Sam. Need you to... Read something, I said. His voice sharpened. Send it now. Don't sign anything. I didn't. That evening, Nathan left, said he had a flight. Mom walked him to the car, arms linked. I watched from the upstairs window, the same window I used to sneak out of at 17 to avoid dinner parties. They hugged. He got in. But before he drove off, he looked up, looked straight at the window. Right at me and smiled. Not a warm smile, a knowing one. He knew I'd seen it all, the document, the plan, the agenda. And his smile wasn't a threat. It was permission. Permission to play the game, because he thought he'd already won. But he hadn't read my blueprint yet. I arrived at the house an hour earlier than usual. Said I needed more time to prep the floor joists in the back wing. That wasn't a lie. I just left out the part where I also needed time alone, to move through the house like a ghost with a purpose. The blueprints for the renovation were in my bag, along with a flash drive, a portable scanner, and my phone set to silent. Every movement was deliberate, every glance calculated. I didn't knock on my father's office door. I didn't check if the security camera near the hallway coat closet, the one they'd installed after the break-in 2 years ago, was on. I already knew it hadn't worked in months. I was the one who'd told them they needed to upgrade the system. They never did. Inside the office, I went straight to the tall filing cabinet, bottom drawer. The one labeled Archive, 2012-2016. Buried behind tax folders and irrelevant contracts was a thin folder labeled Claire Seed Fund. I opened it. There were 3 items inside: a copy of the wire transfer confirmation, a printed email from Mom, "Use this wisely, sweetheart, we believe in you," and a blank piece of paper with the words "Loan terms pending" typed at the top, unsigned. I scanned them all in seconds, saved, tucked everything back exactly as I'd found it. The folder looked like a footnote, but it wasn't. It was their foundation. A weak one. I heard a car pulling into the driveway. I closed the cabinet and slipped out the back door. 5 minutes later, I came in through the front, whistling softly, a half-full coffee in hand. Dad was unpacking tiles. "You're early," he said. Trying to impress the project manager? His voice held a joke, but his eyes didn't. "Trying to beat the sun," I replied. "Framing's faster when I'm not dodging shadows." We didn't speak after that. At lunch, I made a show of reviewing material receipts in the dining room. Mom hovered nearby, offering iced tea, asking about cabinet finishes, her voice soft, sweet. "Claire, we so appreciate you stepping up for..." It's been such a relief. I glanced up. Happy to help. Her eyes sparkled with gratitude. Or calculation. It was hard to tell anymore. I waited until she left the room. Then I turned my phone back on, opened the voice memo app, hit record, placed the phone under a stack of color samples. 10 minutes. Later, I left the room, walked to the back patio, waited. Like clockwork, they came in. First Dad, then Mom. I couldn't hear much from outside, but I didn't need to. When I retrieved the phone later, played it back, the conversation was sharp. Surgical. She's logging hours, counting materials. That's not casual, Dad said. Nathan said she might pull something legal. He's drafting a contingency. Response. Let him. Just make sure the room is done before she tries anything. Once we flip the asset in Q4, she'll be irrelevant. I paused the recording, replayed the phrase, flip the asset. The house. The entire remodel was a setup, a resale plan. They didn't even intend to keep the guest wing. It wasn't for visiting relatives or long-term hosting. It was staged value, and my work was their profit margin. I stared at the stack of receipts on the table. Every item I'd fronted, every hour I hadn't yet billed. I was their investment, not their daughter. That night, I texted Sam. Need to talk. Need options. He responded instantly. We met. At a diner off Route 11. Quiet. No cameras. Sam slid into the booth, ordered black coffee, and listened. I told him everything. The recorded audio, the unsigned draft, the intentional use of my labor as leverage. When I finished, he took a slow sip. You're not crazy. You're being cornered. Mechanics lien? I asked. Yes, but document everything first. Every nail, every invoice, every email, then file, quietly. Won't that escalate? He looked at me. Claire, they're already at war. You're just the only one still playing peacetime. I nodded. The next morning, I changed my routine. Showed up late. Claimed supply delays. Mom frowned. You're usually so punctual. Adjusting to priorities, I said. I watched her process that. File it somewhere. That day, I started, taking photos of every piece I installed. Time-stamped, geotagged. I logged my hours in a separate spreadsheet, sent myself backups. Each act was a nail, not into their floor, but into their legal coffin. That afternoon, I saw Nathan's name flash across my phone screen. I let it ring. Then listened to the voicemail. His voice was smooth, almost warm. Claire, hey, just wanted to check in. Everything going okay with the renovation? Mom said it's going well. Give me a call when you're free. Nothing urgent. Nothing suspicious, except for the fact that Mom didn't use the word going well. She said under control during breakfast. The exact phrase. Word for word. Nathan had spoken to her that morning. She just hadn't said so. That voicemail wasn't check-in. It was surveillance. I didn't call him back. That night, I opened my inbox. 2 new emails, one from Nathan. Subject, minor. Doc review, just housekeeping. Attached was a new version of the loan agreement, with my name already signed, digitally. The timestamp was 3 days ago. It wasn't just a forgery, it was a bluff, a trap. If I denied it, I'd look unstable. If I stayed silent, they'd claim consent. But what they hadn't counted on was that I'd already scanned the original, unsigned, with metadata proving the file hadn't been touched since 2014. I forwarded the forged document to Sam with one line. Game on. 1 hour later, he called. I ran the signature through Doc Verify. It's fraudulent. You're covered, as long as we strike fast. How fast? Tomorrow morning. We file the lien, public record. Once that hits, they can't refinance, sell, or transfer title until they deal with you. And if they deny it, they won't. You'll watch them unravel. I leaned back in my chair. The house around me felt smaller, like a dollhouse, like something carefully built for appearance, not for living. For the first time, I saw it clearly. The family I was raised in wasn't blood. It was design, a set, a series of scripts. And I was never cast in the lead, but I was about to rewrite the ending. Quietly, legally, without screaming, without warning. The kind of ending you only see coming when it's too late. The kind that looks like surrender until it's not. I started counting things. Not just hours or materials. I'd already been doing that. I started counting silences, pauses in conversation, glances that lasted a second too long. Phone calls that ended the moment I entered a room. There's a rhythm to a house when something is being hidden inside it. And the Morgan house, pristine, curated, perfectly lit, was offbeat. The work on the guest wing was moving ahead smoothly, at least on paper. Behind the walls, I was documenting everything. Every shipment I paid for, every square foot of hardwood I installed. I logged timestamps for when I arrived, when I left, and the condition of the site before and after. It looked obsessive. It wasn't. It was insurance. One afternoon, my father offered to help me lift drywall sheets. I almost laughed. Alan Morgan didn't lift things. He directed. He oversaw. He called people who lifted. But that day, he wore gloves. Cheap ones. Barely used. He followed me into the construction zone like a man trying to remember how to act human. "You always work alone?" he asked, gripping one side of the panel. "I hire crews for big jobs. This one's personal." He gave a short nod. "Well, it looks solid. Real craftsmanship." That sentence. That one. I stopped for just a beat too long. "Thanks," I said, not meeting his eyes. We carried the drywall into place. He helped hold it while I secured the studs. The silence between us stretched and hardened. He spoke again. "You know, I always thought you'd end up in something more structured." "Like what?" I asked. "Law? Finance? Nathan said you had a good mind for contracts." My hand froze midair. Drill pressed against the edge. That wasn't a compliment. It was a probe. A warning. A clue. He was measuring me, not the wall. When I came back in that evening, Mom was on the phone in the kitchen. She turned away the second. She saw me. Too late. I caught the last few words. "She won't sign anything if she smells pressure." I walked to the fridge, pulled a bottle of water. She hung up, too quickly. "Dinner's in an hour," she said. "I'll be out back. Need to call in a supplier." She smiled. "Don't work too hard, Claire. You've done so much already." It sounded kind, but the phrasing was strange. Framed, like an exit cue. I stepped outside and dialed Sam. He answered on the second ring. "I'm ready," I said. "Then let's prep." We went over it all. The lien filing, the format of the invoice, how to timestamp labor logs, how to establish value-added proof that would hold up in court. I asked him if I should give my parents notice before submitting the lien. His voice was flat. "No. Let the silence speak for you." I ended the call, stared at the outline of the house against the dusky sky. I used to think of it as a fortress, of judgment, of expectation, of frozen standards. But now it looked like something else entirely, a stage, a set. And I was the understudy who'd learned her lines too well. That night, as I backed up files to a cloud server, I noticed a notification. A shared folder had been updated. One I didn't recognize, but the name was familiar. Nathan Mobile Backup. It had been accidentally synced when I logged into the house Wi-Fi using a recovery login Mom gave me, in case the guest network was spotty. That was no accident. That was bait. But they hadn't counted on one thing. I always check permissions. I opened the folder. Most of it was mundane: photos of case files, screenshots of Zoom calls. But one subfolder was labeled Estate Revision Notes. Inside, several PDFs. One was titled Claire Asset Risk. I opened it. My name was everywhere. Bullet points labeled unmarried, no heirs, no joint financial liabilities. One line: recommend finalization of removal by end of Q2 to avoid contestation window. I leaned back in my chair. Cold. Still. They weren't just cutting me out. They were timing it, calculating how to make sure I wouldn't fight it. And they were betting I wouldn't know how. I highlighted one detail that would have seemed meaningless hours earlier. The document had been created by a third-party firm, Blackstone Equity Consults. I'd seen that name on the shipping invoice for the new bathroom vanities. The remodel wasn't just a family project. It was an asset flip, underwritten, through a shell firm where Nathan had an undisclosed connection. The guest wing was a remodel on paper. But in reality, it was a covert equity transfer, timed to boost the house's market value before removing me from the estate. I wasn't building for family. I was building for a private sale. At dinner, I asked an innocent question. Are we still keeping the west-facing windows in the guest bath? The afternoon glare's brutal. Mom hesitated. Actually, we're thinking of swapping that for a frosted panel. More buyer-friendly. Buyer-friendly. Not guest-friendly. Not family-functional. I nodded. Good idea. I passed her the salad. She passed me the dressing, just like every other night. But the choreography felt slower, as if each gesture had weight now. That night, I stayed up late and finalized the invoice. Every item itemized. Every hour logged. I wrote the note in neutral, clinical language. No emotion, no accusation, just fact. Before sleeping, I scheduled the email. It would send at 9 a.m. At 9:03, I'd file the lien. They could keep pretending nothing was wrong. Until it cost them. I went to bed with my laptop still open. A blank file beside the invoice. For court, if needed. Because this wasn't just a boundary. It was a line in stone. The lien was filed at 9:03 a.m., just as planned. By 9:06, the county's digital records updated, an invisible wire wrapping around the property, locking it in place. My name was now attached to the title of the house like a quiet landmine. They wouldn't know until they tried to move. And when they did, it would be too late to pretend it was all a misunderstanding. At 9:11, my invoice hit their inboxes. It was precise: $14,172, labor, materials, design consulting, heavily discounted, annotated with standard industry rates beside my actual charges. The final note read, as discussed, payment expected upon delivery of services, net 5. That phrase, as discussed, was deliberate. It would force them to either acknowledge our agreement or admit it never existed, which would unravel their entire defense. I didn't wait for a reply. I got in the truck, drove to the lumber yard, and picked up the final window frame. The clerk handed me a paper to sign. His pen was cracked. I brought my own. At 10:27, my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I didn't answer. Seconds later, another call. This time from the landline I knew too well. Then a third. Nathan. I muted the phone and let it rest on the dashboard. Back at the house, everything was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that follows a shockwave. My mother was in the living room, pretending to read. Her posture was stiff. My father stood by the window, arms folded. He didn't speak. I walked through the house like nothing had changed, in my boots, with sawdust still clinging to my jeans, with hands that built the very walls they stood in. By the time I started working, I saw the moment they realized something had snapped. Dad stepped into the construction zone. "Claire," he said, clearing his throat. There seems to be an issue with the county records. I kept marking measurements. Oh? A lien's been filed against the house. It says, by you. I looked up. Yes. He blinked. You didn't mention anything. I wasn't asked. My mother appeared in the doorway. Claire, sweetheart, there must be some mistake. We've always compensated you for your time. She was good. Her voice was soft, hurt, maternal. I handed her a copy of the invoice. She glanced at it, her hand trembling just enough to seem real. Is this a threat? No, I said. It's a receipt. They didn't speak for several seconds. I went back to work. At noon, I received a text from Nathan. We need to discuss this. It's not too late to resolve things amicably. I sent no reply. He followed up with a call. I let it ring. Then voicemail. Claire, you're being irrational. You know this affects all of us. We can clean this up. But if you keep escalating, it will get ugly. Escalating. That word stayed with me, as if I were the one who'd drawn first blood. At 2:14, the permit office called them. I know because Mom's voice rang through the walls. What do you mean it's on hold? No, we weren't notified. That's absurd. It's our property. She said it like property-made people, like possession excused betrayal. I walked past, the hallway where she was pacing on the phone. She saw me and stopped mid-sentence. Claire, she said, what are you trying to do to this family? I looked her in the eye. You already did it to yourselves. She blinked, taken off guard. Then recovered. You're acting like this is war. No, I said. This is architecture. You built this. The next morning, I opened my email to find an unsigned draft settlement agreement. Nathan had prepared. It offered full payment of the invoice, the withdrawal of the lien, and a carefully worded confidentiality clause. It read, in the interest of maintaining familial and community trust. In other words, shut up. I scrolled down. One clause caught my eye. Buried under legal fluff was a small provision. Party A acknowledges that any previous monetary support, provided for business purposes, was structured as a loan, not a gift, and accepts repayment is not feasible. It was elegant, nasty, because by agreeing to settle, I would retroactively validate the lie, that I had accepted money as debt and failed to repay it, and now had to be silenced in exchange for forgiveness. That wasn't an agreement. That was a muzzle. I closed the email. At 3:19, I called Sam. We go public if they push. He didn't ask for clarification. You have backup of the document folder? All of it. I'll prep a release strategy. You'll only need to hit send. I looked outside the window. Across the street, one of Mom's bridge club friends was watering her roses. Her eyes flicked toward the house. Word would spread. They always did, especially when the House of Perfection had scaffolding and a stop order plastered to the front. At dinner, Mom didn't speak. Dad asked me about the weather. I answered. I was polite, formal, like a guest. But I wasn't a guest anymore. I was the contractor, the creditor, the party they couldn't get rid of without leaving a stain. As I cleared my plate, Mom finally spoke. We never wanted this. I didn't turn. You wanted control, I said. You just lost it. She sighed. It's always been difficult with you. No, I said. It's always been honest. That's what made it difficult. I went upstairs, locked the door, and sent the lien confirmation to a secure backup, because now I knew something they didn't. I wasn't just building leverage, I was building escape, brick by brick, word by word, and I wouldn't need their house when I was done. I'd own something far more powerful, the truth and the proof. The renovation halted at exactly 8:42 a.m. when the city inspector knocked on the front door and handed Linda Morgan a printed notice. I watched her take it, lips pursed into a line so thin it looked drawn in pencil, She didn't say a word, just stared at the official red stamp across the top. Permit suspended. Structural discrepancy pending legal review. By 9, the crew, I'd contracted, 3 men from my Portland site, had packed their tools and left without a sound. They didn't ask why. They'd seen things like this before. Family drama, legal crossfire, the kind of job that gets paid in silence or ends in arbitration. Either way, it wasn't worth the day rate. Inside, the house was still. No hammering. No footsteps. Just the low hum of controlled panic trying to hide itself behind closed doors. I made coffee. 10 minutes later, my mother entered the kitchen. She didn't greet me. She didn't touch the cup I poured for her. Instead, she held up the paper with both hands, trembling just enough for me to see. Not weakness, but performance. "What is this?" she asked. I didn't answer immediately. I stirred my coffee, slowly, quietly. "It's a pause," I said, "until certain matters are resolved." She sat down across from me. No makeup, no pearls. Just her real face, sharp and clean and suddenly unfamiliar. "Claire," she said, "you're sabotaging your own family." I looked at her steady. "No, I'm safeguarding my work, and my name. You could have come to us directly. You weren't listening." There was a silence so deep it felt architectural. A silence built on years of her speaking over me. Now she was forced to sit in the space I had carved out with law, not pleading. Then she softened her voice, one of her oldest tactics. "Honey, I know we've had disagreements, but you must see how this looks to others." Ah, there it was. The priority. Not truth, not justice, optics. "Looks," I repeated. "Yes, let's talk about how it looks." I opened my laptop, turned it, to face her. On the screen, the invoice, the lien confirmation. A side-by-side of the original gift email from 2014 and the forged repayment clause Nathan inserted in his draft. She stared at the screen for a long time. "We only did that to protect the family's interests," she finally said. "You mean, your control?" She flinched. Just barely. "You're overreacting." "No," I said. "You're underestimating me." Later that afternoon, I stepped outside to get air. The neighborhood was quiet, except for the sound of hedge trimmers. A few houses down, I caught sight of Mrs. Carruthers, Mom's oldest friend, standing across the street, pretending to water her plants but looking right at the house. She waved. I didn't wave back. At 4:17 p.m., my phone buzzed. An anonymous email. No subject. No sender ID, just a single attachment. I hesitated before opening it, then clicked. Inside, a photo of Nathan, taken inside a boardroom I didn't recognize. Beside him, a man whose face I did. His name was Todd Harris, a private equity fixer, notorious for flipping distressed properties under legal clouds. I'd seen him once before. 2 months ago, at a dinner in Portland, hosted by a client I'd declined to work with because the financing smelled like fraud. They were shaking hands over a blueprint. I zoomed in. It was my parents' house. The guest wing was already sketched for demolition. This hadn't just been a remodel. This had been a front, a transfer. They had planned to sell, or more likely, funnel the deed through a third party, and make my labor part of the package, and Nathan was the one cutting the deal. I sat there in the garden with my hands on my knees, breath cold despite the sun. Someone had sent me that photo, someone on the inside. I called Sam. "Check out Todd Harris," I said. "See if there's a new LLC filing in Lane County." He called back in less than an hour. "There's a holding. Company formed last week. Shell Corp. Lists Nathan's firm as legal rep. And the address? Your parents' house." That night, I confronted my father. He was in the garage, pretending to organize tools he hadn't touched in years. The same garage where I'd heard everything. where this had all begun. "I know about the shell company," I said. He froze. "And I know Nathan's pushing the sale. This was never about a guest wing." He turned slowly. "It was just business. Claire, I'm not your employee." "No," he said. "You were a liability. Now you're a complication. Then you've underestimated me even more than she has." His silence confirmed it. I left the garage and went straight to my laptop. Uploaded everything: the invoice, the lien, the forged contract, the holding company papers, the photo, to a secure drive with public access. I didn't release it. Not yet. Let them think they could still control the fire. Let them sit in the silence of something collapsing around them. Not by force, but by precision. The next morning, my mother tried a new tactic. She made breakfast. "Your favorite," she said. "Blueberry pancakes, like when you were little." I sat down. Ate 3 bites. "They taste different," I said. She smiled, eyes a little wet. "Because you've changed." "No," I replied. "Because I stopped pretending." Then I stood up and walked out, leaving the plate half full and the war nearly over. They didn't know yet, but they had already lost. It started with a message from someone I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. Aaron, my cousin on my father's side. We'd grown up together, but never close. Not for lack of trying, more like lack of permission. She was the daughter of my dad's younger brother, Robert, the one who was always a little too honest, a little too loud about family secrets. After Uncle Robert died, Aaron faded into the background of family gatherings, like someone quietly removed from the frame. The text came at 6:03 a.m. I heard what they did. "You're not the first. Call me if you want the full story." I stared at it for a long time, not because I was surprised, but because a part of me had always suspected there were ghosts beneath the polished surface. Aaron's name was just a door I hadn't realized had been locked until someone turned the knob. I called. She answered on the first ring. "I knew they'd come for you eventually," she said. "What are you talking about?" "They did the same thing to my dad," she replied. "Only he didn't fight. He drank." Aaron's voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that comes from surviving something no one believed when you said it out loud. I listened. She told me about how Uncle Robert had invested in a family property remodel back in the early 2000s, a vacation home he'd worked on every weekend for 2 years. He funded the new roof, rebuilt the entire south wing. All verbal promises of shared ownership, until the day a for sale sign went up and his name vanished from every paper. When he asked, they told him it had never been formal. When he pushed, they brought up a loan they'd supposedly forgiven. Sound familiar? By the time Robert tried to take legal action, he had no receipts, no written agreements, and a drinking problem that made him easy to discredit. Aaron said he died before. The case could even reach mediation. They used his silence as proof he was wrong, she said. He thought keeping the peace was loyalty. All it did was kill him quietly. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. She knew. She continued. They're good at rewriting stories, Claire. Don't let them write yours. I met her that afternoon, at a small cafe an hour away from town, neutral ground. She brought a folder. Inside were photos, receipts, emails she'd printed out and saved from her father's computer. It wasn't much, but it painted a pattern. One of property shifts, asset transfers, disappearing paper trails. Nathan's name appeared in several documents from his early law clerk days, not in signatures, but in file metadata. He'd been involved from the start. They didn't just erase me, they practiced. When I returned to the house, the air had changed. The quiet was no longer tense, it was watchful. I could feel them trying to guess my next move. The phone was ringing when I entered. My mother picked it up. I caught only fragments. Yes, we're aware. She's handling it. Yes, Nathan is drafting a statement. Statement? A chill passed through me. This wasn't just legal now. This was reputational. Public. I went upstairs and opened the shared drive where I'd been storing everything. I added Aaron's folder, created a new subfolder labeled Pattern of Behavior. At 5:12 p.m., Nathan called again. This time, I answered. "You've made your point," he said flatly. "I'm not finished." "Then what do you want?" "You to stop pretending I ever mattered to any of you." There was silence, but not surprise. He sighed. "You want the house? Fine. You want a share? Fine. But this can't go on. It's hurting Mom." "That was her choice," I said. "She's your mother." "No," I replied. "She's your client." Another pause. Then, as if switching strategies mid-call, he softened. "Claire, we can fix this. Your family. We'll draw up a new agreement, rebuild the trust." That word again. Trust. The one they'd weaponized so efficiently I almost missed the bait. "You don't fix something you set on fire," I said. "You walk away before it burns you down." Before he could answer, I ended the call. That night, Aaron texted again. "I just got a LinkedIn notification." Nathan viewed my profile. First time in 10 years. I stared at the message, then laughed. Once. Not out of humor, out of recognition. The game was shifting. Erin wasn't a ghost anymore. She was a liability. To them. And maybe that was why she reached out now. Maybe her timing wasn't kindness. Maybe it was strategy. I called her. Why? Now? She didn't pretend not to understand. Because I waited too long the first time. And it cost me everything. I asked her if she wanted in. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm not just protecting myself anymore. I'm going to expose them." There was a pause. "Then let's do it right," she said. "Let's start with the deed history. The transfers. The fake equity clauses Nathan buried in old cases. I know where to look. I've been watching longer than you think." And just like that, I had an ally. Not one born of loyalty, but one born of shared survival. The next morning, I created a new company file, Restoration Division, Internal. Erin Morgan was the first new hire, not because she was family, but because she understood what family could cost, and wasn't afraid. To collect the debt, morning light filtered through the gauzy curtains of my childhood bedroom, casting soft shadows on the familiar walls. The scent of fresh paint lingered, a stark contrast to the decaying trust that now permeated the house. I sat at the edge of the bed, the weight of the previous night's revelations pressing heavily on my shoulders. The documents Erin had uncovered were spread out before me, each one a testament to the calculated betrayal orchestrated by my own family. Erin had stayed late into the night, her presence a comforting anchor amidst the storm. She had meticulously detailed the history of our family's manipulations, the patterns of control and erasure that had been passed down through generations. Her voice, steady and resolute, had guided me through the labyrinth of deceit, illuminating the path I now had to take. As the sun rose higher, I gathered the documents, organizing them into a coherent narrative. Each piece of evidence was a thread in the tapestry of truth I was weaving, a counterpoint to the lies that had been spun around me. I knew that confronting my family directly would be futile. Their defenses were fortified by years of practiced denial and manipulation. Instead, I would let the truth speak for itself, allowing the weight of evidence to dismantle their facade. I reached out to Sam, my trusted friend and legal advisor, sharing with him the findings Erin and I had compiled. His response was swift and decisive, affirming the validity of our claims and outlining the legal avenues available to us. Together, we began the process of filing a mechanic's lien against my parents' property, a strategic move that would secure my rights and signal my refusal to be marginalized. The days that followed were a blur of legal proceedings and strategic planning. Sam's expertise was invaluable, his guidance ensuring that every step we took was grounded in legality and precision. We documented every interaction, every transaction, building an unassailable case that would withstand scrutiny. Meanwhile, Aaron delved deeper into the family's financial records, uncovering a web of concealed assets and questionable transactions. Her discoveries painted a damning picture of systematic exploitation and deceit, further strengthening our position. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became that this was not just a personal vendetta, but a necessary reckoning. Throughout this process, I maintained a composed exterior, interacting with my family as if nothing had changed. I attended dinners, participated in conversations, all the while concealing the storm that brewed beneath the surface. It was a delicate balance, a performance that required immense restraint and control. One evening, as we sat in the living room, my mother broached the subject of the renovation. Her tone was casual, but her eyes betrayed a hint of apprehension. "Claire, we appreciate the work you've done on the house," she said, her voice measured. "It's coming along nicely." I nodded, offering a polite smile. "I'm glad you're satisfied with the progress." She hesitated, then continued. "We were thinking of having Nathan review the contracts, just to ensure everything is in order." I met her gaze, my expression neutral. "That's a good idea. Transparency is important." The conversation drifted to other topics, but the underlying tension remained. I could sense their unease, the subtle shifts in demeanor that indicated a growing awareness of the impending confrontation. As the legal proceedings advanced, we received confirmation that the mechanic's lien had been successfully filed. The news sent ripples through the family, prompting a flurry of calls and messages. Nathan reached out, his tone laced with concern and veiled threats. "Claire, this is unnecessary," he said. "We can resolve this amicably." I remained firm. "The lien is a protective measure, ensuring that my contributions are recognized and compensated. It's not a personal attack." He sighed, frustration evident. "You're making this more complicated than it needs to be." "I'm simply asserting my rights," I replied. "If everything is above board, there shouldn't be an issue." The conversation ended without resolution, but I knew that the message had been received. The balance of power was shifting, and they were beginning to realize that their control was waning. In the days that followed, I continued to gather evidence, documenting every instance of manipulation and deceit. Aaron's research uncovered a pattern of behavior that extended beyond our immediate family, revealing a legacy of exploitation that spanned generations. It was a sobering realization, one that underscored the necessity of our actions. As we prepared for the legal proceedings, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. The pain of betrayal, the isolation, the struggle for recognition, all had culminated in this moment of reckoning. I had faced the darkness within my family and emerged resolute, determined to reclaim my narrative and assert my worth. The confrontation was inevitable, but I faced it with clarity and conviction. Armed with truth and fortified by the support of allies like Sam and Aaron, I was ready to dismantle the facade and expose the reality beneath. This was not just about inheritance or recognition. It was about justice, about breaking the cycle of manipulation and reclaiming agency. In the quiet before the storm, I stood alone in the renovated living room, the space transformed by my efforts. It was a testament to my resilience, a physical manifestation of my journey. As I looked around, I felt a sense of peace, knowing that I had done everything in my power to confront the truth and seek justice. The battle was far from over, but I was no longer the passive participant. I was the architect of my destiny, the author of my story, and I was ready to see it through to the end. The hearing took place on a Thursday morning, gray and unremarkable, the kind of day where nothing was supposed to change. And yet, everything did. The courtroom was quiet, clinical, stripped of drama, until the evidence began to speak. Contracts with missing signatures, retroactive gifts disguised as loans, emails between my parents and Nathan, carefully worded but unmistakable in their intent. Sam delivered it all without malice, just clarity. Erin sat 2 rows behind me, her presence a steady pulse. And across the aisle, my mother, composed, arms folded, her lips drawn into a neutral line that could slice glass. Alan beside her, eyes unfocused. Nathan, tight-jawed, legal pad untouched. They hadn't expected I'd follow through. They hadn't expected I'd build a structure more solid than their silence. The judge didn't issue a dramatic ruling. There was no gavel slammed. Just a statement. The lien was valid. The court would not block its execution. My work on the house had value, measurable and enforceable. The second decision was more subtle but more devastating, a recommendation, to open a formal inquiry into the misuse of financial instruments between family members. The fallout wasn't immediate, it never is. But the next morning, a message arrived. A formal offer from Nathan's firm, a quiet settlement, no admission of wrongdoing, a full payout on my contributions plus a gesture of goodwill, large enough to taste like regret. I didn't reply right away. I went back to the house instead. I walked through the space I had poured weeks of labor into, the crown molding I'd argued with contractors over, the recessed lighting I had insisted on balancing just right against, the dark-stained floors. The house looked like a photo in a magazine, but it was cold, lifeless, just like the people inside it. Linda was in the kitchen when I entered. She turned, saw me, and for once, said nothing. Her hand rested on the marble countertop, one I had designed, chosen, fought to install. She looked at me as if trying to find some familiar anchor, some piece of the daughter she had controlled. For years, I didn't offer it. I accepted the offer, I said simply. Good, she replied, but it came out brittle. I waited. She didn't ask why. She didn't apologize. She didn't even pretend to. You know, I said after a beat, when I came here, I thought maybe there was still something to rebuild, not just the living room. Us. She didn't flinch. Some things don't need rebuilding. I nodded. You're right. And then I walked out. For good. 6 months later, I bought a property outside Portland. Small, slightly run down, nothing glamorous, but mine. Sam and I turned it into a co-working and co-living space for women contractors and designers who had left the industry after being sidelined or silenced. Erin left her job and joined me full-time. We called it Second Foundation. The irony? It's everything my parents said would fail. And it's thriving. But it's not the success I want to talk to you about. It's what it costs to stop proving your worth to people committed to never seeing it. It's learning that not every betrayal is loud. Some wear a smile. Some sign your checks. Some even call you family. But the truth is this: blood isn't the bond. Respect is. And when respect is gone, there's no inheritance worth staying silent for. If you're watching this, maybe you've felt what I felt. That quiet sting of knowing the people who should lift you only ever hold you down. Maybe you've kept peace at the expense of your voice. Maybe you've told yourself, I'm overreacting, just to stay welcome in a room that never saw your full self. Don't do that anymore. Document everything. Know your rights. Build something no one can take from you. And if they still try, you don't have to scream, you don't have to burn it all, you just have to step out and build something better. And trust me, you will. If this story spoke to you, subscribe to this channel. Your support helps keep stories like these alive. Ones that don't flinch from the dark, but find the light anyway, and maybe one day you'll tell yours, and we'll be here to hear it.